Hello, everyone. I am here with Gini Dietrich, who is the founder and CEO of Arment Dietrich, a Chicago-based integrated marketing communications firm. She's also the lead blogger at the PR and marketing blog Spin Sucks, is co-author of Marketing in the Round, and is also co-host of Inside PR, a weekly podcast about communications and social media. And today we are going to talk about objectivism in journalism and how social media, page views, and Google are affecting it. First off, Gini, can you please help me pronounce objectivism?
Objectivism. You did it right.
Objectivism. I guess. I don't know. It's a hard word, and I think I have a bit of a speech impediment, but I think everyone knows. We're going to be talking about being objective in journalism. How about that?
There you go. There you go.
There you go. There you go, perfectly. All right, so this is obviously a huge thing these days. You know, you have lots of people, lots of news sites, lots of new news sites, kind of quotes with the news, who have popped up over the years and supposedly have given newsworthy, but it's really been about click, you know, all the way to possibly clickbait. At the very least, I think all of us can agree that a lot of very surface level type of information is being given out. If it's true or not, I don't think they even care about. And then you have, you know, how this has affected other types of, you know, very newsworthy sites like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, all of them, because, you know, they're getting clicks taken away, and that's where they get paid. So this is a big deal, and that's why you have the ad blockers coming up, and you have all this stuff that's centered around all this, and I think it really boils down to this. So first off, please give me your take on where we are currently with journalism in regards to being objective versus, I guess, sensationalism, which is the counter of that.
So I'll give you a personal experience. During the Republican National Committee soiree, right after Donald Trump gave his speech, you know, to accept the nomination, I was looking through the front page of the New York Times the next morning, and the two stories on the New York Times front page, front cover, above the fold were about how, and I can't remember the headline, but essentially the first one, you know, that kind of ran the width of the newspaper was, he gave his speech, he's an idiot, I can't believe that we're letting this person accept the nomination.
Oh,
the
really?
second one, right? Yeah. The second one that ran the vertical of the front page was about how he had this opportunity to get up in front of millions of people on a global stage and talk about, you know, his childhood and where he came from and the things that he's learned, and start to talk about his policies. And he didn't take advantage of that. Instead, he chose to you know, talk poorly about his opponent and all those other things.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I tend to agree that he should not be our next president, I looked at that and I looked at that and I thought, this is incredible, because it was completely full of opinion. It was completely full of, I guess, what you would call clickbait, even though it was the actual newspaper. And it was, even though it was somewhat based in fact, it was based in fact from the perspective of, I'm going to use these facts to support my opinion. And you're supposed to have, I mean, the New York Times, even though they've always said it's a liberal bending and blah, 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 it still has always had sort of that journalistic integrity. And I looked at that and I thought, this is where we are. This is the world that we're in. Because no longer is it about journalistic integrity. It's all about sensationalism. And you know who changed that was Michael Arrington at TechCrunch. He said, he's famous for saying, it doesn't matter if we get it right as long as we get it first. We can always change it later.
Yeah, I saw that when I was doing research on this, and I couldn't believe it. That was as early as 2014. I think it said that he said that. That's only 2 years ago. You know, that's awful. I know. And you know what? I mean, do we blame the New York Times, or do we just kind of pity them, the fact that, man, they're mixed up in all of this? You know, you have your BuzzFeeds of the world who are, you know, and then, you know, New York Times needs to be able to pay journalists. I mean, that, yeah, I feel so stuck, you know, and I feel, and I'm not even, you know, in that world. And I only can imagine where they are. So, I mean, basically you're saying it's gotten to the top, you know, the disease has gotten all the way to the
top of the food chain.
The disease has
gotten to the top. Yep, it totally has.
I mean, so I know you mentioned that, what was his name from Gawker, or previously from Gawker, I guess?
Michael Arrington.
Yeah. So you mentioned how that's, how he stated it, but what do you think led to this problem? I mean, is it, I guess you just answered that. What do you think led to all this?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think it's our need for, what should I call it? We all like a good train wreck, right? Like the whole, you always stop for a train wreck. Always.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it goes everything from seeing an accident on the freeway to,
mm-hmm.
Wanting to see whatever is going on online. And so when you have what I'll call quote unquote journalism working toward that and trying to appease that, that's where it stems from. Yeah, it's part of the emotion of the human being.
And our attention deficit, our attention keeps getting lower and lower and lower and lower. I think, what do they say, 8 seconds? You have before you start thinking about. And that's just social media. So that's just, again, we're just stating, like, we're basically just describing the world that we live in right now, which is, as obviously as we get going, we're going to talk about hopefully some potential solutions. Hopefully it's not pie in the sky stuff, and we'll get to all that. But it's just the world that we're currently living in, and that's basically it. The quick hits. I think BuzzFeed's probably a pretty big, probably part of this, and taking money away from these other sites, and the decline of the newspaper print, and stuff like that, I guess. But who or what do you think are the biggest culprits in all of this?
I think it is, it's BuzzFeed, it's TechCrunch, it's, the Huffington Post to some matters, it's Vox, I would say is guilty of it. Upworthy, even though they post good stuff, it's very clickbaity, So I think there's lots of organizations that are guilty of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And now on the flip side, and unfortunately, you led with an example of the highest on the food chain, basically, or one of the highest. But who are the ones? And maybe you can still, give props to the New York Times and some of these others. But who are the ones still trying to do it the right way, in your opinion?
So hard. Yeah, I think
I can name one for you. Texas Tribune here in Austin, Texas.
Do they still?
Yeah, and I know they really, really do a very good job of biting their tongues and stuff and doing it the right way, because it's a political site and they have to toe the line between Republicans and Democrats. So they
sure.
don't. I guess that's one of those things where the forces of nature force them to be that way, because if not, their whole business model breaks down. Because it's about both. So they're almost forced to do it. So that's one, but it's kind of a somewhat local. They're national-ish, just because they're pretty big. But do you know of anyone else, on a national scale that might be trying to do it the right way?
I think you have to almost go international. You've got Guardian, who seems to be a little more fair and balanced. BBC, of course, does. I was sad to see Al Jazeera go away, because they were doing a really nice job of fair and balanced. The Wall Street Journal, I think, still does to some extent. But the New York Times, which was sort of always been my favorite, and just because I already said that I don't believe Voldemort should be our next president, you probably know which way I vote. But
that might be part of the reason they did that, though. He's bad, but yeah. Yeah,
but at the same time, and maybe they know their audience better than I do, and maybe their audience is, 95% of people who wouldn't vote for him, and maybe that's why they did it. But it still seems like when you have a national media outlet that is supposed to be here for fair and unbalanced information and for us to get actual news without bias, and you have what's supposed to be one of the best in the country, and they're not doing it, is kind of it's a hard pill to swallow, I think.
Yeah. Well, a couple of other ones doing it the right way are MSNBC and Fox News. No, I'm joking.
No, neither one of those are biased at all.
The best, you know what you can do though, is you can watch both, and if you watch both, you might get some truth.
I still think you're not getting. I still don't think you're getting the truth. I really don't.
No, I agree. I've always said that that's the only way I can even try to get a handle on what's going on is I have to watch both. And I guess I lean left. Overall, I really lean middle. I want a middle party. That's really what I want. But I lean left, but I do.
Too, yeah.
But I'll watch Fox News because I don't want to just hear people massaging my opinion. I want to hear the other side.
But you're not the norm. You're not the norm. I'm not the norm. We're both educated human beings, and they just did a study over the weekend that said that the number one person who's that has said they're going to vote for Donald Trump is an uneducated, like 8th grade educated white male.
Yeah, right. I just saw that too.
So they're not going to do that kind of research. They like to have their opinions massaged, and I totally think that way, and that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's
I was right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful. So I think we've identified there's a problem, and I don't know if we're like we're like we're geniuses here. I think if you start talking about this in the least, you'll like you're right. Yeah, this is insane. This is awful. If you just go with the stream, you might not realize it, but if you take a half step back, you'll see it. But to kind of see like Facebook's role in all of this and like the filter bubble. Can you educate people what the filter bubble is and what it means to all of us?
So, yes, and I think it goes to exactly what you were just saying, where you tend to have, well, first of all, you read or watch the news that you agree with, right? And I think that goes for anything. You read bloggers that you agree with, you read books that tend to support your thinking, all those kinds of things. So it's not just news media. So we live in this bubble that we've created for ourselves, that we've filtered out the stuff that we don't agree with. And then, of course, it's sort of been proven lately that this may not be the case, but it looks to be that Facebook particularly, they have human being aggregators of content, and it looked to be that they tended to be more liberal leaning. And so the information that was on Facebook, trending stories and things like that tended to be more liberal leaning. I still think that that's probably the case. I do think, just based on what I've been watching and reading, but from both sides of the party line, that Facebook seems to be taking that very seriously and trying to provide a more fair and balanced. But trending stories by itself, you're probably going to see something different than I see, just because of friends and who you let into your stream and who you've unfollowed but remain friends with and all those kinds of things. So you've created this bubble around yourself with news and friends and family and blogs and everything that supports the way that you think.
So basically, the filter row, it's basically like an algorithm that
right.
Facebook will put in front of your, on your feed what they think that you want to see. Is that basically it in a nutshell?
Right.
Which would be basically like only allowing a right-wing person to watch Fox News information, and on the left wing only having MSNBC stuff get in front of them, basically, no matter that. So you're just going to keep purveying that over and over. And if you're saying they lean left, well then will they force the left-wing stuff in front of somebody who has shown to lean right as far as political stuff goes?
Not necessarily, but I think they are trying to balance it out more. It's this thing with Kim Kardashian. Why the heck do I have to keep seeing Kim Kardashian in my streams? I don't care. But apparently my friends do. So, it's that kind of stuff where you may continue to see it. I mean, if you just look at Facebook trending stories right this second, let's see what it is. I'm sure there's some Olympic stuff, but let's look and see.
Yeah, I have to have a little Usain Bolt on there.
Well, there's Miley Cyrus and Liam Hemsworth. There's Kevin Hart got married. There was an unidentified woman's body found near a jogging path right by my house. That's awesome.
Oh, goodness.
Well, there's Kendall Jenner, so there's a Kardashian.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
you called it.
Gabby Douglas is far down, but it's not about the actual Olympics. It's about her feelings were hurt over criticism.
Oh, goodness.
And that is the only thing in Facebook trending stories right now about the Olympics. That's the only
thing. Did you
thing.
just see everything you just mentioned? I mean, all of that should have been on, in one of those U.S. weeklies or whatever the trashy ones are,
Right,
I mean,
right.
I don't know if U.S. Weekly is a trashy one. I can't remember. But those other ones, every single one of those things, every single one. So there is a problem. There's a problem. And, getting to, and I guess, native ads, clickbait, native ads have been abused and the like. Is there anything happening that might help control all of this?
No, because I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is people love the trash. I mean, that's just human beings. I don't think we can stop that.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I think we all, okay, I think we're in agreement, or me and you in agreement, and I think most everybody would be hard to disagree that this is actually happening. There's too much data out there showing that it is. So I think we all can agree that the integrity of news sites and news in general has taken a hit over the years, but there's also been lots of problems that have been brought a light shown on them, which is a good thing, bases like the good old boy network, holding everything in, or Big Brother, that kind of mindset. So what's your overall take? Does the good that has come out of the growth of web and, shining light on some of this stuff outshine the bad that has come with it, or vice versa? I mean, I think I know your answer based on hearing your frustration on it all, but, we used to be dictated what people wanted to feed us. So there is some good that's come of it, but what's your take on that? Overall, I mean, would you rather have it the other way, or do you like it now, or where is your head out there?
Did you happen to watch the O.J. Simpson special on ESPN, the 5-part or 8-part documentary?
I have watched about 30 hours of O.J. Simpson stuff. Yes, I watched the entire one with the Kardashians and the one with David Schwimmer and all that, and then I did watch all the 30 for 30. They were fantastic. But yes, I did.
Yeah. So what I thought was interesting about that whole thing is, they sort of wove in the LA riots and Rodney King and sort of all of that horrible racist stuff that was happening back then. And I thought it was interesting how they talked about, O.J. Simpson didn't want to participate in that as a leader of the African-American community because he simply just didn't want to be seen as an African-American.
Well, he's O.J.
Right. He's O.J. Simpson, right? So what I found interesting about that and how, that whole side story of things is nothing's changed. Black men are still being killed by cops. And I think what's happening right now is because of exactly what you said, that we have access and there's a bigger megaphone and people can, Facebook live stream being pulled over or whatever it happens to be, people live streaming getting shot. It's now making it a priority to get fixed. And what was that, 40 years ago? So all of this has been going on underneath our noses for 40 years, and it's never been brought to light until now. And I think it's because of social media and the megaphone and being able to do all those things. And I hope that it does fix it because it's been 40 years. That's unreal. It's unreal.
Yeah. No, I was going through the same thing, and I was watching it. I was like, this is unreal. I mean, and it almost changed my mind a little bit. I was always just irritated that O.J. Simpson, the man, just that person in particular, got off, because I think it's hard to argue that he didn't do it. But after watching that, I kind of changed my mind on if for the greater. Now I really see where the defense was coming from. It wasn't about him. Right. And I never ever, even in watching all the other 18 hours plus that 12 or whatever, I still but finally watching that one, I was like, you know what? And especially the fact that he ended up getting in jail anyways, that particular O.J. Simpson person, it made it a lot easier to have my opinion, because if he was still walking around and, and pictures of him in hot tubs with all these girls and all that stuff playing golf, it's hard to stomach, but,
right.
the fact that happened, it, it really solidifies, like, you know what, I feel bad for that the family, the other family that had to deal with it.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
I think overall I think it worked out the way it needed to work out, because it brought a lot of light on those issues, and it's hard to argue that they're not issues. You have to be really close-minded to not, open your eyes and just see what's going on in the world. So that's the good that's come out of, the sensationalism stuff. It's shown a light on problems. So that is a huge check mark in the favor, right?
I think so too. Yeah, I think so too.
The bad check mark is, what can you believe anymore?
Right.
And,
right.
Are people getting their second and third sources or whatever they need that journalists have, as far as what they're supposed to be doing to be, hold their integrity, and then not, and I'm sure they're getting pressures for clicks and money and all that, and that's a big problem. And part of this could be an economical problem, could be economy's probably played a part in all of this.
For sure, yeah, because you've got to, you're right, you said this earlier, but they have to be able to pay their journalists, and if they're not making any money, and I mean, the podcast that you recorded earlier about ad blocking, and people are blocking all of that, and it's still the wild, wild west that we live in. What I think is interesting about this is, do you happen to remember when Natasha Richardson died, and she'd had an accident on the ski slopes and had bumped her head, and
Who?
It killed her. Natasha Richardson. She was Liam Neeson's wife.
Okay.
It was interesting because this had to have been, well, we can look it up, but it was several years ago. And it was, I first saw it on Twitter that they were reporting that she had died from this fall, which seemed benign because I think she was even on the bunny hill. So, like, she just slipped and happened to hit her head, and that's what killed her. But they had reported it on Twitter, and TMZ kept saying, like, she's dead. And nobody believed TMZ. So you waited, like, I think it was 2 days before traditional media confirmed that she had died. And so you just, back then, you just sort of waited to see if the traditional media was going to confirm it. And now, TMZ, which I don't know how we live in this world, but every time they report on something like that, they're right. They're right every time. And you look at it and you go, how is it that the Wall Street Journal or CNN or MSNBC or the Fox News or whatever it happens to be can't get this right, but freaking TMZ can?
That's funny. Now, and you know what? Who knows? Maybe that's going to be the solution one day. Maybe these other sites who kind of did it a sneakily weird, almost bad, way, end up maybe somebody from the Wall Street Journal or New York Times ends up running one of those sites, and then they morph, good
into
journalism
something more,
with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just hoping that we get all this figured out, because I just think it's, I don't know. I mean, it's just the right thing, but I think overall, if you do, I would like to think if you do things the right way, that it's the best. It ends up being the best way as well for everybody as far as economy and everything. I know that's stupid to say, I guess,
no,
but I'd like to
hope,
Right. I'd like to hope there's at least a solution. So let's maybe move forward with that. So, like, you have paywalls, micropayment, especially with this other thing with the Bitcoin and then some other form of micropayment out there. I forget what it's called. You have mobile apps, digital subscriptions. So first off, just please quickly describe what these are in case people aren't familiar with them, and then move on to let me know if you believe, and you could talk about them, in unison or individually, but if they work and if these are potential solutions. So we got paywalls, micropayments, mobile apps, digital subscriptions, and then other forms of monetization that can work for newsworthy sites.
I think it depends. I think it depends on the site. I think it depends on the information that they're creating. For Spin Sucks specifically, we've created a sort of a professional development reputation, and so we can sell online courses. But I will tell you that in 2011, we had this big vision to launch a membership site that, had courses, and this was before online courses were a thing, and, you would join this membership site and pay $50 a month, and you would have access to all these experts and classes and all those kinds of things, and it flopped miserably. I mean, we spent 6 figures, I'll tell you that, a lot of money to get this up and going, and nobody cared. So I think
nobody wanted to pay, you mean? You weren't getting your subscriptions?
No, nobody, like $0. So
oh, man, that's been a bummer.
We decided, yeah, it was bad. Last year, we decided to just sort of dip our toe back into the water. I was a little reticent, of course, and we did a pilot of an online course and nailed it. We nailed it. So I think that what's happening is...
back up. Let's skip over from failure to success. I mean, you just gave like an amazing example of, and then you're like, I know it's about yourself, so maybe that's why you skipped over. So, what changed?
Well,
what did you do differently?
This is what major media sites are going through as well, is they're testing certain things to see what happens, to see what works and what doesn't. And that's what we did. And what we discovered was that, yes, we have created a reputation as a professional development site. And when there's something very, 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 very specific that people have said they want, they are willing to pay for it. But it has to be at a certain level of professionalism. Like, there's all these sorts things, right, that have to happen.
You have to have clout. You have to have trust.
Yeah, you have to have trust.
And you built that in those 4 years. In the 4 years,
you
speak a lot, and you try. So all of that obviously played a part.
You
wrote books, so you did all that, and you've done all this free content. You've done all this stuff. So you did that. You built clout, built reputation, built trust. And the ad blocking one that you mentioned earlier, I did with Bo Sachs, that'll be coming out shortly. Before this one, that was his main thing. So you got to build that trust. You did that. But then you also mentioned something in there about people will pay for something specifically that they want. So how did you find out what that was?
I asked.
Okay. How did you ask, and how did you?
I literally sent a survey, and I said, if you could spend 1 hour with me, what would we talk about? And I got, smart-ass answers like, well, we would just have wine and cupcakes, which is fine. Totally cool. I'm good with that. And I got things like, an hour is not enough. Or, I got I didn't get anything real from some people. And then some people really took it seriously and said things like, I'd love to figure out how you're all over the place from a content perspective. Or I'd love to have an hour of your time every month for coaching, to work directly with you. Or, they gave those kinds of answers. And then we just waited. We waited those answers. We actually, this is a little known trick, but I asked, if you could spend an hour with me, what would we talk about? And it was 2 questions. And the second question was, if I need more information, may I call you? And the reason you do that is not because you're going to call all these people. It's because if people are willing to leave their phone number, they're more invested in the answer that they gave you, and they'd like to talk to you about it. So some people said no thanks, or, not necessary, or not, things like that, or you already have my number, except that it was an anonymous survey and I didn't know who had said it, right? So, but if people left their number, then I weighted that higher than those that didn't, and then we sort of mathematically took the top 20% responses, and we went through those, and we looked to see, of those 20%, where were we? And we ended up with 3 different buckets. And so we created a course last year that's relaunching later this year on how to use media relations and content to increase your search results, increase your generate qualified leads, and convert sales. So that's an online course.
So basically, what you just mentioned on that course is basically how you combine PR with content marketing?
Yep.
Is that, can I have,
that's exactly it.
Can I have an hour of your time on that one? I'm not joking. I just got that question to me in a sales meeting the other day, and I unfortunately was
really?
like, no, yes, and I had to say no, I haven't worked with PR firm with my staff's probably listening to this right now, and they're like shaking their head probably because I had to be honest, and the answer was no, I have not. And logically, it seems like I could figure it out a little bit, but But no, the answer is no. So on the side, yeah, when is that course?
We're launching September 20th. I'll let you know.
Okay, please do. Can you make a note to ding me about that?
Yes, I will.
Because
I will.
That's funny. I mean, that just happened 4 days ago to me. And,
wow.
Yeah. It's funny how this happened. How life works, right? Things happen.
Yeah, it is funny how life works.
Yeah. So that's awesome.
I think that's the difference is, you know, and to go back to the very, very beginning when we were talking about the New York Times, and perhaps they do know their audience so well that, you know, this kind of thing works out from, you know, them mixing opinion with fact. Maybe it works for them because they know their audience so well. But, you know, as a New York Times subscriber, I've never received an email, a survey asking me what I want. I've never received any sort of survey asking what I would pay for. And I think that's part of the issue is, you know, the lack of trust, because now it's not, you see it as a fair and balanced publication. And then, you know, to go to Bo's thing, which I hope people will listen to before they listen to this. And then it goes to that, and it also goes to, they're just sort of, from my perspective as a subscriber, just sitting in a conference room saying, well, let's try this, and not really asking what the readers would pay for.
Yeah, I want to just emphasize, you know, kind of or emphasize this a little bit, because, you know, we're talking, there's a problem, you know, and it almost felt like we weren't even going to get to any real solution just because it seems like the problem was bigger than any solution could solve. But to take this into, you know, obviously a lot of marketers and business people will be listening to this, and to put this in, you know, real life, everyday media outlets, be it if you're a publishing site or you know, media site or whatever, you know, a training course or whatever, is basically you got to build that trust. You know, you can't, this isn't going to work for somebody who says, great idea, I'm going to start this tomorrow. I'll send an email out to a list of 100,000 people that I just bought this list from, and yeah, that's not going to work. But, you know, over time, you know, from doing content marketing and blogs and podcasts, and if you have the chops for it, you know, write a book, do speaking engagements, you know, or if you're just a, you know, a good old-fashioned, you know, publisher, you know, whatever your niche is, you know, continuously, you know, be an expert on whatever you're writing about. So over time, you're going to build the trust. So I know that's a little bit of a fast, like, assumption being made, but, you know, nothing's really that easy. So that happens, and you build it. This is a huge key point. You can now, and even New York Times, you know, Wall Street Journal, you know, what would you pay for? You know, what would be worth $29 a year or $59 or $99 a year? What is that? And then that right there is a business model to figure out, you know, and you don't need, you know, I mean, you can do the math real quick. You get 1,000 subscribers, you know, paying you $100 a year, you know, you're in business, right?
Right.
So, yeah. I think that is a potential solution for some of this, so for some of these outlets that want to hold integrity, and you know, and hey, if they need to downsize a tad, you know, but now they know that they can trust the money that's coming in because they have this passionate fan base that is paying them for what they want to hear. And all you did was, well, all you did. Again, I fast forwarded through the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years that you've been putting in the sweat, you know, the elbow grease to get to the point where people will pay you for something, but then you just asked, and that worked gargantuanly different than 4 years ago, huh? Right. That's awesome.
But I'm curious, how would you answer that? So if the New York Times were to survey you and ask you what you would pay for, what would you say?
Well, you know, if you're asking me particularly, people ask me this stuff, and I really only read certain. I do a lot of reading, but it's only in a couple areas. One, you know, one's personal and one is business. Personal, I just like to read about spiritual stuff, right? Not necessarily religious at all, but just, you know, those are the books that I read on for that aren't like that. But then on the business side, I just read a bunch of marketing stuff constantly, and normally it's from people like you and, you know, Social Media Examiner, Joe Pulizzi's, Marcus Sheridan, Andrew Davis's of the world, all that stuff. You know, I just follow them. Marketing profs, I get a ton of great information from. So that stuff I read. So if they were to ask me something like that, yeah, I mean, well, seeing that this happened 5 days ago, I think you answered my question because I want to learn about that. But yeah, I mean, I would probably say I would, if I could get, you know, one particular question answered a month, I'd pay $49 a month for that. You know, my personal question. If I had a personal question that I wanted, if I could get my personal question answered. Now, is that realistic? I don't know. You know, but if somebody out there could do it, you know, that would be worth it.
What if they came out and they said, I mean, and the New York Times isn't going to do this, but let's just go on that example. What if they came out and they said, wow, you know, of all of our readers, marketing people tend to make up 40%, so that's a pretty significant number for us. What if we went to the top marketers and, you know, it could be the people you just listed. It could be Joe, it could be Ann, it could be Marcus, it could be Andrew, it could, you know, it could be Andy Costadina, whoever happens to be, and say to them, you know, we'll pay you guys a stipend every month to create exclusive content for us that doesn't run anywhere else. You can't get it on SpinSucks, you can't get it in Marketing Props, you can't get it on the Sales Lion. And it's only going to be on the New York Times, and they charge for that. You'd be interested in that, right?
I'd 100% pay for that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we you know, one of our speakers. For all of them. Yeah, right. Well, we do that right now with a guy named John Loomer with Facebook advertising because he's just the best, and so we subscribe to his stuff, you know, and that's his business model. But yeah, I would say if a big site, you know, used that business model, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I think people, I mean, 100% people would pay. I'd pay for it, 100%. Yeah, especially if they based it on, you know, or maybe like if once a year I got my question answered, right? You know, or something. And you know how many, you know, you really think my question is going to be unique? No. You know, it'll, you know, from 10,000 people, there'll probably be, you know, 1,000 or had the same exact question, you know. So, you know, the business model could work because you're not going to really answer 10,000 questions. You probably answer 800, you know. But yeah, so no, absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's a potential solution. So I guess who can we trust moving forward, Gini? Is there anyone we can trust in this digital age?
You know, I think it's up to, again, it depends. You know, I don't necessarily know that the big guys are who we can trust. I think you said it earlier, which was you have to go to 2 or 3 different sites to confirm stuff. You know, Snopes is my friend because anytime something publishes that I go, wait a second, that can't be real. You know, you have to check it out because it's you know, and people doctor photos and share them, and you know, all those kinds of things are happening right now. So I think it's up to us as individuals to be as educated as we can, to try to listen to both sides, to, you know, before we're sharing information, make sure it's right, it's correct, that it's not, you know, I don't know if you saw this over the weekend, but one of the media sites, I can't remember who it was, took the picture. Do you remember about a year ago when the picture of Steven Spielberg in front of one of the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park went viral because everyone was like, I can't believe he's shot that and he's using that as a trophy, and people were like, that's a freaking dinosaur.
No, I don't. That's hilarious.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, everybody, like a year ago, everybody's all up in arms because Steven Spielberg has hunted and shot this ginormous animal and he's holding up it as a trophy, and I was like, it's a dinosaur.
That is unbelievable. No.
So one
I knew
of
about
the media
sites, but I didn't know about that one.
Right. I think it was around that same time that he did it, just sort of as a parody to show that you know, you have to use your brain. So one of the media sites took that photo like in the last week and went out on the street and asked people what they thought. And it's the same thing. I can't believe he would do that. What kind of person shoots an animal like that? No, like hardly anybody said it was a dinosaur. It's a dinosaur. Use your critical thinking skills. And I think that's what we're missing is people are not using critical thinking skills. They see something, we have attention spans of gnats, and we are incredulous, and so we share it, and then we've perpetuated it.
Okay. So where do you see the future? Okay, where do you see the future of journalism going, and how would journalist jobs roles change?
You know, you said it earlier, and it may be that, you know, I know BuzzFeed is trying really hard to become more trusted and actually fact-based and deliver the news, but of course they have this reputation of being BuzzFeed. So maybe it is something like that. I also saw that one of the editors, I want to say from the Wall Street Journal, but don't quote me on that. It was one of the big publications, and it was the managing editor who's gone out on her own to start something new. So I think it is going to be people, journalists who see what's wrong with the world and have an idea on how to monetize it, and they're the ones, you know, we're going to see stuff popping up that probably will be more trusted than what I'll call the traditional media.
Yeah, well, let's just hope there's, you know, the Richard Bransons of the world in the media industry, right? People who want to do it right, but are smart and understand that you need a mix. I don't want to use the word sensationalism with it, but excitement, I guess, or just knowing how to make money. Know how to make money, but do it with, you know, Gaia capitalism in mind. So maybe Gaia journalism. Why don't you write a blog post about that? Just give me credit for it. Start something called Gaia journalism, you know, and let's see if we can create a movement for let people make, because I mean you can't tell people to eat peanuts, but at least you were honest, right? I mean you gotta be able to make you know pay your bills and you know live a nice life. So it's just you know maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's the answer, and I will say this from my experience, I do see a growing demand for high-quality journalism and writers. I thought maybe 5-ish years ago, maybe a little bit more than that, journalists couldn't make a buck, right? I mean, they just they were so devalued because of, I guess the breaking point in a good way was all the updates, the penguin updates on Google and stuff that started to do away with all the just write, baby, just write, right? Just write and stuff and go. It doesn't matter. And it didn't matter. But seeing when that changed, and especially as things have gotten more crowded, the quality of what you're reading and write, I guess, you know, from them what they're writing, but what people has become so important. So I do see, you know, that's a very nice career you can go into now if you're good. You know, you're gonna, you know, this isn't for thousands. You know, I'm not saying that you're gonna be 10,000, you know, hundreds and thousands of new jobs for journalists. No, it's going to be good ones. You know, but there is a career there. So I guess. How do you see their job changing, though? If somebody was wanting to go into journalism, where would you say, like, you know, we've kind of touched on it, and I kind of have my own opinion, and I'll throw in my opinion after yours, but how do you see the journalist job roles and, I guess, their skill sets maybe changing? Or what do you need in this new age that we live in?
Well, I think it is changing and evolving because now journalists are paid based on page views. So they have to be good at social media. They have to be decent at search engine optimization. They have to, you know, they have to understand how all of those pieces work, just like a content marketer has to understand it. So, you know, until the big boys in the, you know, conference rooms figure out how to monetize this stuff and they're paying people based on how many page views they get, you know, human nature is to say, well, if I'm going to be paid on page views, then I'm probably going to do something a little sensationalism.
Yeah. No, but I think you nailed it. I think journalists need to be superior writers, and then on top of that, they at least need to know the basics of all the other stuff. You know, they need to know how
I think so.
Tag everything right and do all that good stuff, and you know, and possibly even getting into the social part of it all, as far as the strategy around all of that. But you know, that's not to say, you know, great piece of content, you know, and if it's spot on, will, you know, can get going too, you know. Maybe not as much as Cecil the Lion or Steven Spielberg, but you know, maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's these sites who mix in some of that stuff with people know it's not real, like a BuzzFeed could do this, you know, their business model. They could lead with some of that stuff to get people on the page, but that's just like, we're just joking around, that's fun, but hey, here's some good shit, right? And maybe that's the way, you know?
Well, so, and, you know, I mean, we do Gin and Topics every Friday, which is just the 5 funniest videos that we found during the week. It has nothing to do with PR. It has nothing to do with marketing. It's just 5 funny videos that we give you every, you know, once a week. And so you can do that kind of stuff to bring people in and then have the more serious stuff, you know, the rest of the time.
Gini, it sounds like you're doing it. Maybe I'm going to nominate you as my guided journalism ambassador, because I think the 2 things that we've talked about that other companies can do, you're doing right now, and you're seeing them work, right?
We are seeing them work. I mean, we're definitely tested, but at the same time, we're not a journalism site. We're not, you know, we're not the New York Times that's supposed to be out there telling the world all the good things that are happening. That's not us by far. I mean, we're definitely a professional service or professional development site.
Yeah. Yeah, but you have an audience.
We do.
So, there's some similarities. All right. Well, just any parting thoughts, anything anybody can do to kind of, you know, if they're like, yeah, this needs to change, anything anybody can do to help, and any parting thoughts, anything to leave us with?
I think it goes back to what we were talking about in terms of, you know, being diligent about making sure that the stuff that you're sharing is true and it's accurate, and that you're not sharing a viral photo of Steven Spielberg who killed an animal. You know, I think those are the kinds of things that we have to be really diligent about.
All right. I think that's a good pointer. Everyone, you know, can help out with our new movement, Gini. It's our new movement. So how can people continue to learn from you?
Spinsucks.com.
Spinsucks.com. That's it. And what's your Twitter handle?
My name, Gini Dietrich.
That's GINIDIETRICH. All right, Gini.
Look at you. That's awesome.
I was reading it. It's right in front of me.
Oh.
So, all right. Well, hey, thanks so much. Always fun, and this was very interesting to dig into. And you know, hopefully, maybe we get to one person who, you know, that's been sitting on an idea that they run with, or maybe we inspire a Wall Street Journal, you know, person to go and, you know, do something similar to what that other lady's doing. You mentioned of breaking out and doing something.
Yep.
You never know. You never know. Well, thanks so much, Janine. Till next time.
Thanks for having me.
All righty. Bye-bye.